From our studios this week in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. Scott, we are back home for a brief respite, and you are in between hurricanes, so we're going to try.
Getting ready for Hurricane Milton. Yay! So it's funny because I just noticed the lighting looks different. I'm trying to figure out why the lighting looks. It's because I've already boarded up the windows in my office, so there's that. But anyway, we have no idea what's going to happen. But, at this point, I've got the boards, I've got the screws, and I've got a drill. So let's just go ahead and do it. But, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. We'll hope it doesn't completely disrupt the haunt season here in Florida. Maybe we'll talk about that next week to see what happens. Because, between the theme parks and the independent haunters and, the zoos and the aquariums, et cetera, the 1-2 punch of Helene and Milton could be really detrimental to our haunt season, but we'll see what happens.
We will see. Yeah, there will be a story that we will come back to, I'm sure, because especially with the 1-2 punch is really what's going to make it difficult for a lot of people who haven't finished setting back up. And then we'll see how far. Anyway, that is next week's next week's discussion.
Because again, it's all just guesswork now. We know what one hurricane did, but what do two hurricanes do? And we'll answer that question on a future episode.
So today we will start off with the FanFest details. So Universal Hollywood gave us more details about the FanFest event that we have talked about previously that they announced. And this is pretty smart. They actually announced it during LA Comic-Con, which if anyone had any doubt as to the market that they are going after, the fact that they announced it at LA Comic, come on, guys. I don't know if I would have let them do that if I were LA Comic Con, but that's what it is. So,
I don't know. I think it's a win-win situation. I think it's great for the con as well.
Yeah, to work in with them. Yeah, I think we'll see.
I mean, it's just like IAAPA. When any park has a big announcement to do, if they can do it at IAAPA, they do it at IAAPA, and IAAPA just kind of bases their attendance on who's announcing what,
Yeah. So they announced quite a few additions to what they already had planned. So we'll just run through it pretty quickly. So they announced that they're going to feature 2 anime fandom favorites, One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen, and that the event will kick off on Friday, April 25th, and continue through May 18th, which is almost a month for its first run, which is pretty decent. I mean, now I think now we look at Horror Nights and we're like, oh, it's 3, it's 2 and whatever month, and it's almost 3. If Disney's almost 3 months, so this is a pretty good initial start off. If we think back to like Pride Nights, they're just 2 individual nights, so I think it's a pretty good initial run for this. And they say here that in addition to recently announced news that the USS Enterprise D from Star Trek, The Next Generation, would be featured as part of the FanFest nights, Universal said that the actual bridge set piece featured in the 3rd and final season of Star Trek Picard would be a major component of the experience, inviting guests and fans to enjoy unique opportunities, see it as part of its all-new world. One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen will join the previously announced experiences, including Star Trek, Back to the Future, and Dungeons & Dragons, as well as new experiences debut within theme park's magical wizarding world of Harry Potter land. So the latest press release just kind of goes through the different fandoms and blah, blah, blah. They don't really give specifics as to what you're actually going to be able to do. The only few specifics they talk about is the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, where you're going to be able to step into the theme park's immersive land to engage in new magical experiences, from encountering magical creatures, including a Niffler, and more. And then they mention the bridge, and they mention the specific people from the animes you will see. So you'll see like Yuji from Jujutsu Kaisen. So still a lot of elements, but that's standard. That's literally standard. I mean, like they're not going to give away the entire event beforehand, and probably a lot of it is not even decided or cleared with the IP houses or built yet, in a lot of cases. So it's really, there's a lot going on there, but I think it is a lot of things we've been talking about, right? Expansion into anime IP, which we've talked about previously, but that's really a much larger game here. It's expanding the overall market. And as Scott has mentioned, for Epic, it's the same strategy of appealing to niche fandoms. Whereas One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen are very wildly pop. More people watch those animes than go to theme parks, like hands down. So they're very popular. But then when you get into the Star Trek Picard and you get into some of the more little niche items like the D&D, I mean, that's not as widespread. I'm not too sure, but I mean, this whole idea of mixing niche audiences together into a fan fest thing is something that Scott had talked about for Epic.
Well, this is almost like doing pop-up in a park.
Yeah.
These are pop-up experiences in a theme park. And I think that it's interesting because, despite the fact that, the whole anime world does have a huge following, having been to Gen Con, don't leave Dungeons and Dragons out there in the cold, because
that's true.
Gen Con was bigger than any anime convention I've ever seen. The whole gaming world is just over the top. Now, granted, there is overlap in that world, just like there's overlap with. To me, it's kind of like the Gen Con mentality. What they're doing is they're bringing these IPs in that people want to live, that people want to LARP, and they're bringing them in a way that is. They don't have to build an entire new land or world. They have to, in essence, do pop-ups, and they can. It's also kind of smart because to me, it might just be they're doing a little bit of research and development here to see what sticks. Say for example, if a Niffler, just because you mentioned Niffler, if Niffler is a huge success and is easy to operate, Niffler may become a regular offering for the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. If One Piece just blows them out of the water, One Piece may be included as a realm in the next park. There's all kinds of benefits to approaching this way. I also think sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think what you're saying about that, it's really smart. Like the mix of fandoms is pretty ingenious in how it is almost replicating the classic theme park mentality of like family, something for everybody. This mix of these putting together, like you said, the Niffler and those items, like they already have the Harry Potter audience because they have the Wizarding World there. So we're going to add an extra thing in there for that. And then you get the new people with the anime, and then you get some of the older generations, I think, with some of the older, and D&D is a whole different play. Like you mentioned, D&D and anime, they're different. So it's different. But also the age groups it's reaching, right? Like 42% of Gen Z Americans watch anime weekly. It was a result from a 2024 Polygon survey. I mean, so these are markets they don't necessarily reach too much of, the Gen Z market normally. And so I think so I think placing all of these IPs together in this way is very smart because it's something for everybody of cross-generational stuff.
Right. And One Piece is perfect because not with the live action that was on streaming of One Piece, which also brought it to a whole nother audience. I think what they're doing is they're as you've said, they're looking at the numbers and go, you know what, if we can just bring in just the Star Trek folks, that will bring back people of a certain age. And it may not be as currently hot, but it's got depth as far as generation after generation after generation. There are people older than me who watched the original series, and there are people younger than me who are watching Lower Decks and the animated stuff that's going on now, and loving every moment of it. So the Star Trek universe may not necessarily be the hottest thing right now, but the roots go very deep.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I also like how they're really leaning into, in my opinion, what makes Universal and these types of events at theme parks differentiated, because so they're bringing in like a piece of real set from that thing,
Right.
which is something that only Universal can do, right? Because they have it. And
Well, and
then,
that used to be the basis of Universal in the past.
yep, exactly.
They used to say ride the movies. That was the whole marketing campaign. And
Yep.
they've kind of moved away from that now. And I think it's really exciting. I mean, one of the coolest, and again, I keep harping back to Star Trek, but one of the coolest Star Trek things I ever did was in Vegas when they did the Star Trek experience.
Yep.
Was it the Hilton in Vegas?
I remember that.
Oh my God. And you actually got transported
Yep.
to the bridge of the Enterprise from Next Gen.
Yep.
It was absolutely breathtaking.
Yep.
The most amazing experience based on an IP that I've ever had.
Yep. And so if they could do something similar to that with the production value of that, but enough. You got to keep throughput in mind, but it's not like here's the thing. It leans into all their strengths. Like they know how to build sets and how to move people through things fast from Horror Nights, right? Mm-hmm. They have access to elements from the studio portion that other people don't have access to. And then even when you look at their choice of anime, Jujutsu Kaisen and One Piece are both IPs they have worked with heavily in Japan. Even for Halloween Horror Nights, they're doing a whole episode that is only going to air in Halloween Horror Nights at USJ for Jujutsu Kaisen. And One Piece has been in their parades before. They've built parade floats for One Piece. So it's not, they know how to represent these characters.
Yeah, these are, I mean, even though these are not necessarily IPs they own, because they don't, but these are IPs that they are familiar with and know how to work with. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So I think all those things are in their favor. So I have increasingly high hopes for this event as something that could, as we talked about previously, potentially be the future of.
Well, and as a pop-up experience, that it has a fuse. So, is the bridge of season 3 of Picard, is that a full-time draw? No, but if it's concentrated into a 2-month event or a 1-month event, hell yeah, that'll. Yep. We've been talking about what is the next shoulder season, and I think that's what they're experimenting with.
Exactly. Okay. So changing now, shifting to the UK. Previously, it was announced that Universal was considering putting a park in the UK, and we have sort of an update from that. Basically, what we heard this past week is that the plans for a Universal Studios resort and theme park near Bedford have entered a period of quiet as the company negotiates with the government. But so far, there are no red flags to prevent the Bedford Borough City Council supporting the theme park, according to a meeting they said. And basically, there's an article that goes more into it and explaining the process about it. But essentially, now is the part where they're negotiating, like who's going to pay for the infrastructure, what type of investments need to be made in order to handle capacity, where would all those lines of stuff fall, and it's all like closed to comment. So I think this kind of sound like we had been talking about previously, where we stopped hearing anything about it. So this seems like a push by everyone to say you're not supposed to be hearing anything about it because we're still negotiating, but it could happen, and there's nothing crazy wrong with it. I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah, to me, this makes the most sense. This is actually no news is good news at this point.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that they are talking about, I'm sure, is what infrastructure needs to happen with roads to handle the crowds. What infrastructure needs to happen with lodging and hotels. And if this information were public, then there could be a lot of people who could get a lot of people who aren't qualified would say, oh, here's a get rich quick scheme. Let's go ahead and throw all of our investment in here. And that would be actually detrimental to the whole experience, because if they're trying to get rich quick, it's going to fail. So hopefully they're part of that behind closed doors negotiation is with hoteliers and, the all of the support stuff that they need to surround a park. Because let's face it, I keep looking at Orlando. Orlando was swamp until Disney, and now there's actually more outside of the parks than there is inside the parks, and all that
Yep.
is because of the parks. So
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It also, I think it's kind of funny. Again, the master PR scheme at Universal is pretty good because they've managed to stay in the news every week.
even by
You know,
saying, "Hey, that England park, nothing's happening," but that's okay.
yeah, that's okay. That's how it's supposed to work. And we're like, okay, I guess. But yeah, so I guess we don't know. They didn't really disclose a timeline, which again, they wouldn't because these negotiations can take a very long time, i.e. Disneyland Forward, right? So we gotta just sit back and wait and see what updates come down the pipeline.
Yeah, I'm guessing what's gonna happen is once these have gone through, they're not gonna come out and say, "Hey, guess what? We've made agreements to make 15 new roads and put 3 more exits on a major highway."
Exactly.
They're not gonna talk about that. They're gonna come out and talk about the cool stuff that's probably already done, but they can't really announce it and announce stuff that is going to fuel the fires of attendance until they get this other stuff worked out, so that they don't have any problems and don't have any issues and they don't have pushback from the locals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep, precisely. Okay, moving back to the U.S. now. It is still haunt season. I know it's God, it feels like it's been eons already, but it's still
Well, and
haunt
you go
season.
to everything, so it's like, where was Philip this week?
So Philip, this weekend, I made it back from Orlando back to Los Angeles for the weekend, which is why I'm still here. Before I set out for Asia on Monday, and I had the chance this weekend to experience Dark Harbor and LA Haunted Hayride, which are both produced by 13th Floor Entertainment Group. And I saw some of our great friends and some listeners at the Dark Harbor experience last night, which was great to run into everybody there. And let me tell you, I have so many conflicting thoughts on this event because it is so interesting when you think about the history and just how it all works together. But first, kind of just the lay of the land. So it is I would describe it more as a festival. It feels like a very large festival to me. It's a much larger footprint, in my opinion, than the previous Dark Harbor event that happened 4 years ago. Was the last time of it. And it has a lot of different entertainment options from different items like mushed together. So you do have mazes, classic mazes. There are 5 of them, the classic mazes. 3 are on the ship itself and 2 are outside, kind of in the whatever it's called, the harbor area that's outside in front of the ship. And so what they do is they kind of like close off that entire harbor area in front of the ship. And then that's where they kind of build the festival area. And then parking, there's preferred parking that's like in the nearby park. And then there is general parking, which is in a structure more downtown, which they then have a shuttle service that runs back and forth. So, and they are moving a lot of people. I mean, we're talking, I wouldn't be surprised if this event saw over 100,000 attendees in the run of the event. I mean, it's a lot. It is. That's what I mean when I say it feels like a festival. So you do have these haunts, but then you have the big main area, which has carnival rides. I mean, there are full rides here. So you have the swings, the classic swings, but you also have other rides. There's an enormous amount of food options just everywhere. And they feel very, festival or where you have like the meat that's on sticks and that's out in the big ovens and it's all, all there. You can see and smell everything. So you have all those stands as well. You also have what I would loosely call a scare zones areas. There are zones. There's plenty of zones that's just food and festival atmosphere, but there are a few that are more scare zone-esque where you have pieces of ships and you have a voodoo and you have characters that wander around in the outside part. There's also 2 stages. There's a very large main stage, which is where the first show, the kind of the kickoff done. It's called Maiden's Voyage. That's done at 808. That happens there with the icon characters and the captain. That's also where the last kind of final goodbye happens. And then throughout the night, it is activated with different performers, but there's a DJ there constantly. So that stage is constantly activated. It just, sometimes there's live performers and sometimes it's just the DJ. But this is a large stage. We're talking three level stage with trussing and full lighting kit, and then the side has full projection mapped screens that kind of allow the visuals to extend onto that. So that's kind of happening with music that's going on the entire time. And then the second stage is where they do the performers. They have aerialists, they have fire dancers, they kind of have those performers on that stage. And then there's also a whole slider area where they do slider shows twice nightly, and they do the fire performances 4 times, I think 4 or maybe more times nightly. Could be 6 times. I'm not sure if it's every half hour, basically, stuff goes on over there. And then you have the main stage. So this is what I mean when I'm like, so there's the festival food, there's the games, there's also the stages and more the like music EDM type of stuff going on. There's the fire dancers and that stuff on their stage. But then there's also all of the VIP experiences that add on to that. So this year they opened up sections of the ship where they have one that's like a spirits bar that has, as you walk around the bar, there's placards and there's areas that explain the connection between the icons and the ship and give you more of the history of the spirits that roam there. And there's little themed performances that happen kind of ad hoc with the actors that wander around with the cocktail zone. And then you can even go down into the engine room that is lit up and filled with BGM. And there are bars in the engine room, and you can walk through with a drink and the creepiness and experience that. And then there's a summoning experience, which is kind of like an actor-driven, more individualized, upcharge experience that you can go through that happens on the ship as well. So it's like the ship doesn't just have the mazes; it has at least these 2 bars plus the summoning experience. And then there's also the observation deck, which you can go on, which is another bar, which is kind of closed off. And then they still have the cabanas from previously that you can rent out. So you have levels, I guess, of access that you can pay for in addition to the regular festival vibe. So it's hard for me to really put one box label on it because it does draw from so many different genres, right? The cabanas, even, I mean, that's more like a classic music festival thing, or a
water park.
Or a water park, yeah. It's really, and they have the captain's VIP lounge, and plus not all of them, but I believe 3 of the mazes do have hidden bars as well still. So there's even more. So there's so many levels of different type of entertainment that you could really explore all around the experience. So the reason I want to explain all that is because it truly is a full night experience, because I arrived when the event began at 7 and Amy walked me in. So I was we really were we were there.
We know some folk,
we know some folk, but we were there, to get started, and we had the VIP pass, and all we did was go to the 5 houses, the 5 mazes, and we watched 15 minutes of the slider show, and we watched the opening ceremony, and that took us until midnight with 1 bathroom break. That took us to midnight. So, and that was with the VIP passes. I mean, so this is a full night, right? This is a full night experience, and we still did not even see the 2 of the hidden. I only saw 1 of the secret bars. We didn't see the other 2. We didn't see the VIP area. I mean, there's a lot of areas that we didn't even get to experience, but we did catch the end show. So it is, you can spend a full night there. That being said, the lines were, I think there's no way in an event this size to avoid lines.
Right.
What I noticed is that they made the effort to pull the lines outside instead of in the ship, right? So when you're queuing outside, and then at least you can hear the music and see the fire and all of the lighting and all that. So at least
you're not out of the experience when you're waiting in queue.
Yes, correct. Yeah, but you are still waiting, and it does get a little gnarly, in some of those areas, because the lines, you know how it is. This happens at Universal too, which I, got grumpy at them at too. So if you're in the VIP line, it backs up right out past the line queue. So then you're kind of it starts to bleed over into other areas. So you're like standing in this amorphous line and people are like confused. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but also with the amount of
again,
people there.
this is Dark Harbor coming back the first time. So
Yes.
there is a learning curve here.
Yep.
There is a learning curve. And again, I know some of our friends are listening because they are regular listeners and they comment to us all the time. Having not experienced it, I'm sure that they are looking at this going, oh my gosh, we've got all these lines and all these issues and
Yep.
but it's great information. It's great fodder to continue to improve the experience. One of the things that that I was hired to do for a theme park chain, which I cannot disclose because they ended up not doing it. But one of the things that they were trying to reduce the focus on the haunted attractions, on the haunts themselves, and create realms instead of haunts. There were still haunts, but each realm would have its own walkthrough experience. It would have its own dining experience. It would have its own show experience. It would have its own interactive merchandise experience, and it would have its own roaming characters. So just by entering the realm, you got the story of that, IP or character or whatever. Maybe that's something that it sounds like they could maybe look into so that they could create that illusion of lines that aren't really lines. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It's one of those things like when I go to Wizarding World of Harry Potter, for example, here in Florida, I have more fun in the queue itself than on the actual ride. Because I get to see all the Easter eggs and all the nerdy little stuff. Now I realize that is expensive as hell to try to implement, but I'm sure knowing the people that are involved with this, I am sure that they are doing exactly what we're talking about. They're looking at it and evaluating it going, oh my gosh, yeah, if VIP line is extending past what we have set up for VIP line, it's either an internal operation in the haunt or we need more queuing. We need more stanchions. It's all that stuff. And you don't know. I'll tell you, it's a great problem to have, quite honestly.
Exactly. That means it's popular, right? I mean, that's
exactly.
And that's really
desire. That means that and if they're, and I'm sure there are, because again, I've known these people for a very long time, super smart. They're looking at it going, we don't want any sort of negative stuff out front, and if there is, we need to be able to deal with it so that when people get here, they don't experience what any negativity has been sent.
Yep. And I will say a lot of so what's interesting to me is that this does what's so interesting. I think, again, the common fan will have no idea, but to me, this felt like a modern version of Dark Harbor. So this isn't the Dark Harbor from 4 years ago. It's a more modern version, which to everything that we've been talking about the show means, again, there's more to do that is not just the haunt focus, so that somebody who didn't want to, if you don't want to go through the haunts, you really don't have to, because you have all the bars, you have the other experiences, you have the music stages, you have all these things. And that's a relatively modern viewpoint, for something that is a haunted house event in essence. And also a lot of little things like, remember, these are not the same producers, right? And then also the props and the fabrication was not usable. They talked about this during some of their presentations, but a lot of the props had been ransacked, and wasn't locked up properly and wasn't stored properly. And so essentially what they had to do, which is such a weird thing, is they had to most of the stuff, except I think for one maze, but most of it is new. So 4 mazes plus all the other stuff is all new, but they had to make it look like it was from the old event. And these are different producers from who produced the previous event. So it's not like they even had vendor contracts or staffing, anything. They didn't have anything, no assets, no anything.
Well,
and so they're having to recreate.
I guess my question is though, why would they have to make it look like it was from the old event?
Well, I think that's part of the continuity, right? It's like you want it needs to feel like Dark Harbor, but it's modern version of it. So like you still have the captain, you still have the IP characters, but they look a little different, a little more modern, but you still have to have the captain because it's Dark Harbor. I think that's what they were trying to do.
Well, and a perfect example of this is I just saw images from the Halloween event at Warner Brothers World in Abu Dhabi, and the Hanna-Barbera characters, when they get made up into their Halloween, they are not the traditional Hanna-Barbera characters that we have seen, that I've grown up with. they are the more modern take. If you think about it, this sort of more modern version has happened in, cartoons. There's modern versions of every Scooby-Doo character that ever existed. There's modern versions of the Flintstones and all of that. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily a bad thing, and I think it's kind of a wise choice. If you don't have all the old assets, if you don't have access to all the old designs, you've got to make a creative choice, and it sounds like that's what they did. Now, I have to say, I was not there. I wish I was, because it would have been fun to hang out with y'all. But the idea of recognizing the reality of we don't have all those assets, and then making a creative choice to explain why it doesn't look the same, I think is a great idea.
Yeah. And I just want to underscore too, I don't think that, I think the regular guest arrived and felt like it was Dark Harbor. I heard nothing but positive stuff from the guests in line and all that stuff. So I think that that's all to their benefit. But I mean, for us as professionals, I do want to give them credit for the feat to pull that off, because essentially it's a weird thing to be in, where you're like trying to say, what would Dark Harbor be like in 2024?
Right.
4 year, like, how are we modernizing this, but also making sure that people still recognize it, but also making sure that the logistics are in place, because it's a massive amount of people. And I mean, there's so many, like, it's just, and it's a weird thing, because like, you're not really going to get credit for it. That's the thing, right? When it's a new event. Yeah,
exactly. Here's the bottom line. And you just addressed it. Here's the bottom line. When you said you heard nothing but positive, people were having a good time, that's what it's really all about. Are people having fun? Whether they have come back from Dark Harbor in the past, or they have no idea what Dark Harbor is. Are they having fun? And it sounds like no matter what they wanted to do, they were having a good time. Yes, there are some crowd issues that they can certainly continue to build upon. But you know what? That's true of every event on the planet right now. So there's always going to be crowd issues, whether it's too many or too few. So that's all going to happen. Obviously, we've got so much that we didn't get to on our notes, which is why I would encourage each and every one of you to join us on what we call Green Tagged Unhinged. I think that's official now, which is the Patreon bonus content that we continue to do, because I know already where we're going to start there, because this show's over and has been for about 2.5 minutes. So on behalf of Philip Hernandez with Haunted Attraction Network and Gantom Lighting, and myself, Scott Swenson, with Scott Swenson Creative Development, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we'll see you next week.